I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting for Monday, June 26, 2023. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Corporate officer, do we have any late items? No late items. We're going to approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Peak, Councillor Van Elfen, all in favor? That carries. Consent agenda. Does anybody want to remove anything from the consent agenda? Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just thinking we should have a brief look at item D from North Saanich, Province of BC's Homes for People Action Plan.
Okay, so that will go down to item number 9. Anything else to be removed? So if I could get a motion to approve the consent agenda, Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor? That carries. We have a couple delegations. First up, Peter Forbes from the Summerland Minor Fastball Society. You're at the plate. Just press the button there.
Hold it while I speak, I guess. No. Yeah, no, I was just looking for mayor and council to get a letter of support to get softball started in Summerland again. When COVID hit, the Summerland Association essentially shut down softball. 2 years ago, I helped coach a team based out of Summerland with a bunch of girls from Peachland to Penticton. And this past year, when a couple of those girls dropped off, you know, it's U17 is a tough age to keep girls there. The remaining girls had to go north to Kelowna. My other understanding is that girls that are in this area are either going to Penticton or West Kelowna to play softball. So it's becoming increasingly difficult for parents to keep their girls in that sport. So I was just looking, part of the application is to Softball BC is to make sure you've got support from the community to have to be a part of Softball BC. So I was just looking for a letter from council to support that effort.
Okay, thank you. Might be some questions from council. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a lifelong softball player, I definitely support that kind of initiative. I would be more than happy to help in any way that I can to put a letter together in support. I did see the girls playing, or the young women playing this weekend at Dale Meadows on Saturday morning, and they were outstanding. It was like some really good play and some really good games to watch. So I think that our Summerland teens deserve that opportunity beyond just basketball, which is typically boys.
Okay, thank you. So I guess to the CEO or the corporate officer, what would be the process then for?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just if council would pass a resolution for staff to write a letter of support.
Okay, Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Betts, second. Some motions on the floor. Councillor Peak.
I would like to congratulate Peter at making that opportunity come forward again for our community, and I would certainly support through the council that coming forward and actually happening for you. I think it's a great idea to keep it an independent and to have our students be able to do it in their own community is terrific. Thank you very much for your effort.
You're welcome.
Councillor, no, we're good. So I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Second delegation, Christy Johnson from the Citizens for Concerned Water Usage.
Thank you for accepting my late application today. My name is Christy Johnson and I reside at 6501 Canyon View Road. And as you probably all are aware, I'm here about agenda item 7.1. Firstly, I'd like to address that it's disappointing that this meeting has been scheduled during working hours and grad day, as many people who wish to attend it simply couldn't due to this, myself included. I had to take vacation time to come here today. With a notable volume of people who attended the open house, we can all appreciate that this is a topic that matters to us 240 residents. We want to be a part of the discussion and we want to hear the decision-making process for which many an evening meeting better accommodates. In respect to the recommendations today, it was very nice to have an open house. However, I don't believe all of our feedback was adequately included in the recommendations before council today, and I'm concerned that they don't align with the current master water plan from 2021. Under section 6.9 of the master water plan, it recommends prioritizing existing infrastructure. If metering is the only solution that council can come to, then a cost benefit analysis should be performed for residents. As we heard at the open house, metering treatment of water is one of the biggest expenses currently facing the district. Why add more users when the system's already at capacity? There's been no justification from a cost benefit analysis that this is necessary. If council moves forward towards a metering approach, residents should not be bearing a domestic rate when there's no option for agricultural water. As an example, I live on Canyon View. My only option is treated. I don't have the option for egg water and vice versa for other people in the district. I think that council should maybe, if we do go the route of adopting metering, we should be looking at a different rate for people who are in this predicament. We request to be given a certain allotment and inconsistency with the irrigation water that's already been happening. This is currently offered to agricultural water users and is covered under the master water plan under section 6.9. Water service strategies for lot sizes 0.5 acres to 2 acres. Secondly, the master water plan suggests a rate of $500 for the meter, which is not being bared by the property owner. It clearly states on page 123 that if there's a revenue shortfall in funding a new project, the project would either have to be deferred or the district would have to borrow funds. As we heard at the open house, the district has not reviewed nor applied for grants in accordance with the water plan. This should be something that's happening. And if the only way to proceed is a meter, we would encourage council to absorb the cost through the growing community fund and not pass this cost on to the property owner. Essentially, as 240 residents have subsidized larger properties when we were told we'd experience the same benefits that others would when they had their meters installed. In essence, when council is looking to make a decision on this matter, we encourage council to review the current costs associated with water delivery, treatment, and maintaining equipment, and determine if this is a necessary steps in terms of metering for the 240 properties that were excluded. The district has already doubled the flat rate of water this year, which should offset some costs. And as we heard at the open house, and we all agree, we should pay our fair share for water. However, we do not believe that we should pay for the infrastructure. And at this point, it's unclear if infrastructure is even needed because no cost benefit analysis has been conducted. Lastly, if recommendations from the master water plan are not utilized, it begs the question, why do taxpayers pay for such an expensive and comprehensive study to be completed if the district has no intentions on following it or incorporating the recommendations? Next will be Brendan Smoker.
Hi, thanks. Brendan Smoker, 7209 Happy Valley Road. I'll try to be pretty concise. I just want to go over 3 main points. First one is just to outline the principles of our water system as outlined in our water master plan. So I sent a lot of this to you guys ahead of time quite a while ago, but it's important for you guys to have this in mind when considering on voting on any of this. So these are the principles of our water system as laid out in our water master plan. So sustainability is like directly quoting. Sustainability is a very common term used related to water supply that's often tied to water conservation, metering, and reduced use. A similar goal for sustainability would be to improve water use efficiencies to maximize its beneficial use. The largest beneficial uses of water should be for drinking water and for growing food. That's a principle. Where there is separate water distribution, all outdoor watering should be provided through the irrigation system. It's another one. Summerland is a water supplier, not a water restrictor. Water fees should not be punitive. Separate water distribution systems in rural areas, separate water distribution systems in rural areas. This will reduce chemical usage, electrical consumption, generation of the water treatment plant sludge. Maximize use of existing infrastructure service lines, especially in areas where there's dual distribution. In separate water distribution areas, work to develop and install 2 services per parcel with domestic supplied only to homes and indoor use, irrigation service for outdoor use. Again, another principle quoted from the water master plan. Water pricing is to be as fair as possible with lower cost for water not supplied through the treatment plant. All rural properties with average lot size of 0.8 acres should be considered for separation, and properties of at least 0.49 acres should have a planned second service where irrigation and domestic lines already exist. Again, quoting from the water master plan. And then there's this last one, this gem that's actually buried in the appendix of the water master plan that I think should actually be used to kind of fundamentally ground us in any of your decision making. It's a bit of a longer paragraph, but the excesses of our current society have driven people away from the historical practice of growing their own gardens to provide local sustenance. Local food production is one of the most sustainable strategies available to a community. Domestic home gardens are less common now than they have been historically. However, this may change with global trends as higher food prices and transportation costs. Irrigation customers require water for growing their crops. They require large volumes of water in the local and arid climate, but of lower quality than what's required for domestic use. The plans of this report consider the development of projects that separate out higher and lower qualities of water for long-term appropriate use. Okay, so those are the fundamental principles of our water master plan. So I just encourage you, when you're looking at a new policy, that you weigh it against all those principles. So ask these questions. Does it align with the master plan? Does it encourage the use of untreated water for outdoor use? Does it emphasize and encourage water to grow food, expand orchards and vineyards rather than eliminate them? Or is it punitive, push additional costs on homeowners with no clear gain in water savings? So I'm going to lay out a couple cases for you of what the current policy recommendation is. So the only zero cost option here is to disconnect the second line. This forces many properties to use treated water if they're already on a system that has untreated and treated, to use treated water to water their orchards, vineyards, and gardens. This is directly contradictory to common sense and the water master plan. It also forces properties to undertake expensive irrigation changes, deal with decreased water pressure and flow rates. For some properties, flow rates through domestic lines insufficient, leading to loss of trees and other damages. So yeah, direct contradictions to what our plan is here. Charging domestic rates on the second water line discourages development expansion of orchards, vineyards, gardens. Additionally, the plan to charge essentially 2 times the domestic fixed rate, because you're paying a fixed rate on 2 meters, is punitive. So in this way, Summerland is trying to act as a water restrictor and not a water provider. So I'm laying out, it's straightforward to lay out principles. It's straightforward to compare policy against these principles. As I'm sure you guys realize all the time, it's easy to complain. It's hard to come up with solutions. I'm sure you guys see this at every council meeting probably. It's hard. It's hard to come up with good recommendations. And I thought about this for a while and we had a lot of emails about it. Here are some recommendations I think that are clear and I hope they're agreed to by most people. Of course, we can discuss everything with all 240 property owners. First recommendation, domestic second service should be renamed to small acreage irrigation service. The DSS is misleading. It indicates that it's a second unmetered line with the same function capacity as the primary line. In fact, many of the lines are non-treated and are only meant for irrigation, not for domestic use. You can't call it a second domestic line when it's an irrigation line. The inappropriate label of DSS has resulted in confusion and misunderstanding of what these lines actually are. Summerland Water Utility has 2 water lines, a domestic line and an irrigation line. All of our properties have 1 connection to a domestic line and 1 connection to an irrigation line. Shouldn't name it any other way. No changes should be made to our irrigation lines until the district has completed a proper cost benefit analysis that clearly states how much water they expect to save per dollar spent to do this. We know the cost, it's tons of money. It's like over $1 million to do meters and all of this, but there's no clear statement of how much water you expect to save.
Wrap up, please.
Yeah. So there's no clear idea of how much water that you'd save. So you can't actually compare against other projects and see where can we efficiently put that water. District of Summerland has a growing problem with the cost of residential metering. By 2021, cost of residential metering was over 8% of the total water utility budget, $311,000. To put it in context, this is the cost of servicing residential meters, which are a smaller portion of overall Summerland consumption, is now the 4th largest line item in the budget. It exceeds dam maintenance, distribution system operations, amount for pump houses. It's no longer enough to say it's a well-known fact that water metering reduces consumption or we must follow the same practices as the surrounding communities. It's the district's responsibility to be an efficient steward of our taxes and water. Therefore, it's recommended the district provides a cost-benefit analysis for domestic water metering of all of Summerland. The district can then compare water savings per dollar of various capital projects and initiatives against the cost of water metering to make the most of our limited resources. Think if the millions of dollars spent on residential metering.
Sorry, I'm going to give you a choice. You can finish, but not take any questions from council. I know some councillors have questions, or you can take the questions from council.
Okay, there's one more point I think is very important to make that's very short, and I would like to take questions from council. And this one is very important, especially for the farmers in the room. It was evident from the the open house that there are properties out there that have blue boxes, but are less than the 2 arable acres, who are being told by staff that they must pay to have a new meter installed. This is wrong, and council should clarify to staff that blue boxes are grandfathered into all agricultural properties. That is an issue that came up, and that is something that should be clarified by staff.
Okay, council, any questions? You have it quick, please. Councillor Betts.
Hi, just quickly. Hi, Mr. Smoker. Thanks for your comments, and Ms. Johnson as well. Thank you so much for coming prepared. I really do appreciate your thoughtful contributions. It's really important, and it's part of the dialogue. I did want to clarify, Mr. Smoker, that our water system is the twinning of the irrigation and domestic lines. I would like to ask the Director of Utilities, but I don't believe that that is 100% complete in our entire community.
No,
So,
it's not.
and that's a matter of a huge amount of money, but a lot of the things that you just said was under the understanding that it was complete. That's the way it came across. And so I just want to clarify that that's not the reality at this time.
No, and I understand that. There's a smaller portion of split, but the water master plan emphasizes that this is a very important aspect to reduce load in the water treatment plant, is to put money towards splitting the lines, so then you end up not using treated water. And the policy now on the ones already on untreated lines, Prairie Valley, Garnet Valley, is trying to force them to use treated water to water their orchards as of right now.
Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned near the end of your presentation something about comparing ourselves to other communities, or something about, like, how, can you elaborate on that briefly? Are you saying they're all metered and we should be?
No, this is in response to a comment the mayor made at the open house, saying that we had to follow kind of what everyone else in the basin's doing. I don't know if we really need to do that or not, but I did review a survey done for the BC government in 2016. I tried to find newer information, but couldn't. The surveyed all municipalities in BC. As of 2016, 2/3 of municipalities did not meter water because it was considered too expensive. So they just did bulk metering rates.
Thank you. May I add to that for a moment? I'm very fortunate that I'm able to sit on the RDOS as a representative of our council. And I checked with the CAO and who I could speak to at the RDOS to get some clarity and some information, and the CAO was happy to answer the questions. Meadow Valley, Falder, Naramata, Caledon, OK Falls, Oliver, and Osoyoos regional districts do not have water meters, domestic and or irrigation, and West Bench does. And that's it. Penticton is just starting to implement ag meters as we speak today at their cost.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Trainer.
Just for clarity, would you be able to, you had, I think, 4 suggestions at the end.
Yep,
Can you just quickly repeat those? I
sure.
didn't get
No,
them
it's up
all.
to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so my recommendations. So first one was renaming of the domestic second service because it's misleading. So my suggestion is renaming it to small acreage irrigation service. I mean, you could just call it irrigation service if you want, but for some reason there seems to be an importance to separate off these 1/2 acre to 2 acre lots. You could call it irrigation, but small acreage if you still need to maintain it as separate. So second one is my recommendation is that no changes be made to our irrigation lines until we've actually been presented with a cost benefit analysis. So how much water do you expect to save per dollar spent? We know the dollar, how much it's going to cost. We have no estimate of how much water is going to be saved. My guess is that it's actually very little. So third one, so District of Summerland is a growing problem with cost of residential meters. The recommendation is that actually expanding on the second point, that they do a cost benefit analysis of residential water metering across the entire district. And then say how much water savings do we expect per dollar spent on residential water metering. I'm not talking about ag water metering, but residential water metering, and then stack those against other capital projects you're trying to do, whether it's flume replacement or water separation or replacing old pipes. Because we need, as a citizens, we need to see okay, well, let's just get the low hanging fruit. If the goal is water conservation, then let's conserve water and spend the money where it needs to be spent instead of pouring money into something where the savings is dubious. So fourth one is very specific. It's about blue boxes. This is something actually that Deputy Mayor Trainer, you mentioned at the open house, and Marty, you mentioned before. Multiple people came up at the open house and said, I have a blue box and I am less than this 2 acre arable acreage. And you stated, okay, that's a mistake. That can't be. But city staff actually said, nope, you're less than 2 acre arable. So you're actually now under this DSS system and you need to pay to get your water replaced. And I know you thought it was a misunderstanding, but it actually sounds like it's district policy to try to get them off a blue box, which is never the intention of this. There is no separation of blue boxes and not. It's the reason why blue boxes stopped at 2 acres because the money ran out. There's no other conscious reason of that. So to force people off the blue boxes is just foolish.
Okay, thank you. So now we have our public comment opportunity. We have 15 minutes for this. So I would ask anybody who wants to speak to in respect to the domestic second services, if they could register with
I haven't registered.
Kendra or Amanda, whoever's there. Anybody watching online who would like to speak, email corporateofficer@summerland.ca. And since we have a limited time here, I'd ask everybody, please keep in mind that we only have 15 minutes for this. And so you may wish to keep your comments brief to give everyone an opportunity who wants to speak. And also, please bear in mind, we did have a public meeting a couple of weeks ago where we had an opportunity here for everybody and council listened at that meeting. So if you're going to repeat what you've already said at that meeting, that might not be that useful for council to hear again. If you have any new information, then by all means, please come up to the podium. So first, I would like to ask if there's anybody who would like to speak to any other agenda item besides domestic second services. Mr. Bessler?
Hi, Council. Brad Besler, 18816 Garnet Valley Road. I'm going to speak about agenda items 7.5 and 7.6. I reviewed the 2022 annual report and it refers to the district's principles, which include integrity, honesty, accountability, which includes an obligation to accept responsibility for actions and decisions, and transparency, to communicate clearly and accurately. The annual report also contained a copy of the district's code of ethics, which refers to transparency and states, quote, "We take personal responsibility for our actions and will speak the truth with honesty and openness." And that brings me to agenda item 7.6, the revised 2022 Statement of Financial Information. The reason the statement is being revised is because Aaron Trainer charged taxpayers more than what was first reported. Among Aaron Trainer's expenses for the 2022 UBCM convention was a 2-bedroom hotel suite for her and 5 other family members, rooms 1410 and 1412 at the Delta Whistler. But District Policy 100.6 subsection C states councillors are only entitled to a single hotel room. So to be clear, the issue isn't that Aaron Trainer brought her family to the UBCM. The issue is that she breached district policy to book 2 rooms for her and 5 other family members, all on the taxpayer's dime. The right thing to do would be for Aaron Trainer to repay the district the difference in costs between her and Barkwell's hotel expenses. And I'm not the only one who thinks that. So hopefully you can show some accountability and do what's right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Hello, Gina Bernier, 5849 Dale Avenue. So in regards to what Brad was talking about, recently in an FOI and the Penticton Herald, it's come to light that Councillor Aaron Trainer spent over twice the amount for accommodations than any other attendee from Summerland at the UBCM conference held in Whistler last September. Because she took 5 additional family members with her, the cost for her accommodations was $449 a night. The rest of the Summerland attendees were $179 per night. Counselor Trainer's accommodation was $270 more per night. Contrary to policy, she occupied 2 rooms comprising of a 2-bedroom suite. District Policy 100.6C stipulates single room accommodations as receded. It's very clear this policy was broken by Graham Stott, the approver, and Aaron Trainer, the requester. Graham Stott justifies these extra expenses by suggesting there is money budgeted elsewhere she didn't use. But the money he's referring to is authorized for use while representing the municipality in matters such as meetings, courses, and conventions. Nowhere does it say family vacations. It's extremely concerning neither Councillor Aaron Trainer, CAO Graham Stott, nor Mayor Doug Holmes sees any issue with charging taxpayers extra money to accommodate a councillor's entire family, and they see no need for that councillor to pay the difference between what is allowed by policy and what was spent. I feel this is serious misfeasance in public office. No one is out to get anyone. This isn't about getting anyone. This is an example of poor judgment and leadership, poor leadership being exposed. The right thing to do is to apologize, pay the difference back to the city, and then use those funds for the betterment of our community. None of these actions speak to the district's 5 core values of transparency, respect, honesty, stewardship, and creativity. You owe it to the citizens of Summerland to do better. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, we'll go to the domestic second service. Corporate officer, do you have a list?
So it'd be Aaron first.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll keep this relatively brief as requested. So I have reviewed the estimate and I have sort of, I guess, 2 questions or items I think council should get clarification on. Number 1, I wasn't able to find the bylaw to establish the Growing Communities Fund. And so I guess a question that should be clarified is, has the Growing Communities Fund for the DSS project been approved by council by bylaw in the Summerland 2023 financial plan? Number 2, for the estimate, I noticed at the bottom that not only are we paying for materials, which I could understand, but labor, staff wages have already been accounted for through the financial planning process as a fixed cost. Yet residents would actually have to then cover this again. Also, on the quote, there's contingency for 10%, admin fee for 15%, and GST. I went up and looked at the CRA rules from municipalities regarding GST and municipal water distribution, sewer, and drainage systems. And as a supplier of a service installing, repairing, maintaining, or interrupting the operation of water distribution, it's GST exempt. So I would like to know why residents would be then incurring the GST line item if per CRA, municipality would be exempt. So just a few items that I think would really, if I agree with Christy and Brennan's approach of maybe reassessing the cost benefit, but if we go down that route, critiquing the estimate in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
A little shorter. My name is Dawn Richards. I live at 14119 Prairie Valley Road. And I'd like to speak to, of course, 7.1. I've been up here many times. And so I'm not going to repeat all the things I've always said. But one of the things I'd like to address, I was at the open house. I didn't speak. But a couple of things that sort of stuck in my head was the concept of fair. And of course, everybody has a different concept of what fair is. But over the years, of course, the people that are involved in this issue of separate irrigation line was that we've never objected to having the water meter. It was more about the fact that we were being charged for it. I'm happy to hear that there's at least now a slightly different direction and coming up with some different answers that we've had other than the ones that we've had over the past 10 years. Anyway, like Brendan said, in the 2021 Water Master Plan, the idea of restricting water use or pricing the water with punitive pricing results, any utility becoming a water restrictor and a water provider. I think that's proved itself out over the years because people decided to have their irrigation line cut off because they just couldn't see themselves paying out that much money to keep their gardens going. So I think that's an important part of that plan. The other thing about FAIR is that right now, all domestic users pay for every drop that comes through their house. And ag water users get an allotment of, I believe, 800 millimeters per acre. Is that right? And they only pay for the water if they go over that limit. So what I'm thinking is that maybe since you're looking at how to address this very complex issue, that it'd be a good thing to look at maybe giving domestic, all users an allotment, a small base rate that's included in that monthly fee we pay every month. Because where we live, we're going to not be able to irrigate through our domestic line. We're going to have to probably keep our irrigation line because of the size of our lot. So we'll have two base fees. But if everybody had a certain allotment, then they would actually get that essential service, which is water. They would have a certain amount that would be included in that base fee. And then if they went over, then they would be charged. That way you're getting, you are essentially penalizing those who are water wasters. So with the ideas of fairness in mind, I suggest that number one, meters be installed for the separate irrigation lines at no cost to property owners. A basic water allotment be provided for all domestic users in the name of fairness. The other thing is, our way is maybe do more in the terms of education to ag water users who broadcast water like on the pavement and whatnot. Talk about water wasting. That's a lot of water that doesn't go on to anything but pavement. So just a few things in the terms of fairness that I think should be addressed when you guys are thinking about how to deal with this issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Don. I think we'll wait till we get to our discussion, but we'll probably have to get our Director of Finance to explain to us how those water rates work with the allotments, both for ag and residential, if that's all right, just to prepare you for that. Thanks. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Heather Norish and I live at 27088 Garnet Valley Road. My concern through this all is that in the bylaws, it refers to 2 acres plus for having a specified agricultural rate. Our concern is that we have a pit meter that was put in, and in speaking with Andrew about it, when he came out recently to check it out for us, he stated that he didn't even think it was registered or that was recording. And we've just received a bill every year. Now we have 1.3 arable acres, even though our farm is bigger than that. We are a registered farm and have been for over 20 years. When that pit meter was put in, there was a kerfuffle that I won't get into. We had to go through the Minister of Agriculture, who came down and looked at it. And because the corporation at that time was not going to put it in. Long story short, the provincial government said, you're going to put it in. So we're not sure where it is now. We've been trying to get our information for the last 20 plus years. And now we find out that, oh, you may be a registered farm, but you don't qualify because you're less than that. I strongly suggest that you change your wording in the bylaw, because some of us have made a very successful go of it as a registered farm. We file our paperwork. It's supposed to be every 2 years. I do it every year. And we are very, very frustrated because we are one of the sort of, I know there's a few farms that fall into the same area. And I've spoken to Devin about it and Andrew, and apparently they're supposed to be dealing with these on an individual basis. And I wondered, what is that just their talk, or is this what is actually going to happen? Because I want it on record.
We'll have to follow up on that one. Next speaker? No, that's it. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We'll move on to our business items, which is domestic second services. And who's introducing this? CO Stat?
Thank you, Mayor Holmes. Happy to introduce this. So we're pleased to come forward with what we heard report from the open session that we had there early in June. There are some key themes from the workshop, which Jeremy will go over shortly. The Water Master Plan does envision separating water as an aspirational goal. This is about a $20 million project, and it'll take many years to realize. I would note the vast majority of DSS services are currently on a treated water main, not a raw water main. Many of these properties are in rural areas, many are not. And similarly, there are nearly 2,000 other properties of similar size and use in rural areas and non-rural areas, which do not have the benefit of a DSS service and meet all their water needs through a single domestic water meter. It's not the intent of the district to restrict water by metering water, and these DSS owners are being offered the option to retain their services. And the vast majority of water services, including agricultural water services, are metered in Summerland today. The longtime practice of the district has been to charge owners for the price of a water meter when one's being installed, and that continues to be the case today, for example, in a new home development. The key decision we need from council today is a determination of how the meters will be paid for so that we can restart the choice letter process this fall. With the changes we are recommending to a surface water meter approach, the water utility of the district will now pay more for the meter than property owners would of these DSS services. And we would be looking to draw more than $400,000 from reserves to cover our portion. We'll be back on the rate review as per previous council direction, and any decisions there would be made known to folks before they have to make their choice later this year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
Maybe have a question from Councillor Van Elfen first.
Just for clarity, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You said this has been a long time practice of the district of Summerland for charging for water meters? Are you just meaning on new construction recently?
Yeah, anytime a new water meter goes in, the individual property owner pays for it. They purchase the meter from us and it's installed at their expense. And the example being, for example, in new home construction.
New home construction.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarity.
Thank you, CAO Stat. Hello, Council. Hello, DSS Army. Thank you for attending and thank you for going to the open house and reading our water master plan. It's nice to see people are reading that document. So Council, on March 13th of this year, Council directed staff to host an open house on this subject. The open house was conducted on June 6th. The What We Heard report is attached, and the open house was a committee of the whole meeting. And I believe all of council was in attendance at that meeting. So some of this is something you've already heard and not new information, but I'm still going to provide just a brief summary. All domestic second service customers were mailed invitations. So there was about between 240 and 250 invitations sent out. There were around 150 people in attendance. It started at 6 p.m. and concluded at 10 p.m. We started the night mingling with customers, staff from finance were there, works and infrastructure, utility department, and we had council there as well. And this mingling lasted about 30 minutes where we answered some one-on-one questions. We then had some opening comments from the mayor and presentation by myself. We covered water definitions, statistics for the domestic second services, the history of domestic second services as far as I could find actual written evidence for, pricing, the current program. We had feedback summaries in the presentation that feedback from when we sent the letters out earlier this year and received email and other correspondence. Following the presentations, we had 2 hours of open public comment. For a full transcript of that open public comment, you can refer to the June 6th Committee of the Whole minutes. During the presentation, we also tested the idea of moving to a surface meter to lower the costs for customers. We had mixed feedback on that, but some were positive. And in the following weeks after the open house, we received further emails and we had mixed feedback from customers on that. But there was some acceptance of the idea. Upon review of the comments and the feedback from the open house, we've categorized that into a few categories here, and that's in the report, but I'll touch on them. One was the metering cost, which I think we heard today during the open comment period. General comments were that the meter should be installed with no direct cost for DSS customers, keeping in mind that if the water utility budget pays for them, then all customers will pay for the meters, including DSS customers, but not directly. There were some comments around unknown billing costs. So customers were struggling with estimating what their rate cost would be. And that's because the existing meters are, the existing services are not metered. So they don't necessarily know their usage. And then another category of feedback we felt was the billing rate. So how much do they how much is charged for the water once it's metered? And some of the comments were that in consideration for historical lower cost rate, and that their irrigation systems are designed for that particular rate, and for food security and food production, that the rate should not be domestic, but something closer to ag rate. So council, the purpose of this report and request for a decision is to make some basic decisions, but not all of the decisions. We will come to council at a later date with the rate discussion where we're going to bring some options forward to council. So we're not, I just asked that we put the price of water to the side today, and we'll tackle that one at a following meeting. So for now, just in terms of the meter cost, the report is suggesting that we move from a pit meter to a surface meter, and that would lower the cost for the customer, assuming that council wants to continue with the subsidization that was already contemplated in the existing program. And we believe that'll be about $1,000 for a DSS customer then to have a meter installed. We would need to budget $425,000 to cover that. And the report shows that that's equivalent to a 6.45% water rate increase. And that would be about $59 per water account. DSS customers also brought forward concerns that they don't know how much water they're using because it's unmetered. One of the attendees suggested a mock billing period, and staff thought that was a good idea. We would support that approach. And when we get into the rate discussions later in the year with the options, we'll likely include that as an option. It would be helpful for staff if council would discuss today an approach to that. It does come with some decisions to make. For instance, if we had a mock billing period of, say, a irrigation season or a summer period between turn on and turn off, would that customer pay the basic charge for those months? Would that customer pay maybe the existing flat rate for the year? So if we could hear from council on that, that would help form our report later in the year. So over to council. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer those.
Okay, thank you. Who wants to go first? Councillor Trainer.
Jeremy, when you talk about the cost to all taxpayer or water users, if we go with a subsidized version of the meters, you said it was $425,000. And you said, I think that would be $59 per user. Is that right? Is that over 1 year, or is that over, like, how does that work?
I'm going to pass that over to our CFO.
Let's see if this works. Oh, it does. So to answer your question through the mayor, yes, the $59.02 is basically the $425,000 as a tax or as a water rate increase. So it's a one-year increase.
It's a 1-year increase. Okay. Do we know what that number would be if we were to cover the meters completely? I think you have here 625,000 would be the budget impact. Do we know what that would look like if we were to absorb that completely?
So through the mayor, yes, and so in the council report, option 3 there, it would be 675,000 works out to $93.62 per homeowner, which is a 10.23% rate increase.
For 1 year.
For 1 year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Nelson?
Question through the Minister of Finance. Can you tell me then, can that be distributed over a 5-year period? Because I'm thinking, and I'm sure our Director of Infrastructure can clarify this for me. I can envision the district doing 240 surface water meters in 1 year with all the other stuff that they have on their plates. So could we spread this over a 5-year period? Please, can you give me that answer? Thank you.
So through the mayor, yes, this could be implemented over 2 years, over 3 years, over 5 years. It would quite honestly depend on what council wanted to do. If the longer we were to push that out, I would probably foresee some timing issues in terms of expenses and the money coming back in, depending on how many are done in any current year. We could potentially have higher expenditures in 1 year as opposed to depending on how this rate was broken out over a 5-year term, but it could be done that way.
Follow up? No.
I'm just trying to find it in my agenda. I looked at it earlier, but there was a list of options. Has this been?
RFD.
Pardon?
The RFD, the first one, on the first document.
Thank you. I'll find it.
Okay, Councilor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this question follows up on, was it Dawn's comments about kind of, this is a question for Dave, the basic concept of having a basic allotment of water, which everybody would pay the same. And then if you use greater amounts than that, it's a penalty. Dave, can you speak to the possibilities of that kind of approach?
Maybe if I could just jump in there to add also like how it works now.
Yeah. So through the mayor, I can answer a couple of those questions. So one of the comments was, I believe the comment was that agricultural properties don't pay anything unless they go over. So that is an incorrect statement. Agricultural properties do pay water. They pay a base fee based on their current arable acres. And again, it's based on arable acres. It's $213.38 an acre for 2023. And it's based on that 800 millimeters allotment. So if anyone goes over, that's when the inclining block kicks in. So they do pay for that base amount, just to clarify that. In terms of domestic water, the district's billing model, which is laid out in our fees and charges bylaw, it does provide every parcel under 2 acres with an allotment. It's the 800 millimeter allotment that all of the agricultural water users have as well. So the way our system works is that every property that's billed a domestic rate receives 25 cubic meters. That's their base fee. So everyone gets 25 cubic meters, regardless of the month. Now, in the warmer months or in the irrigation season, so from March all the way down to September, there is a depth allocation that is provided to every property. Every domestic user receives it. And, you know, in March, it's 35 millimeters, in April, it's 95, and it goes on. The numbers all add up to 800. So that is currently being done. So everyone does currently receive an allotment. It's based on the size of the property. We do subtract about 30% of the footprint, because normally you have driveways, you have a house on your property and that. So that's how all that's calculated. So again, we do take that into account in our current billing system. So everyone is billed with that allotment calculation taken into account already.
Councilor Betts.
Thank you, Dave. Just to follow up on that. So is that 25 cubic meters of water for those under 2.0 acres, arable acres, does everybody get the same volume of water allotment, or it's per the depth on each property? If say it's a 0.5 acre, or if it's a 1.4 acre, you get the 800 milliliter allotment, or is it in addition to the 25 cubic meters? Sorry, that's not clear.
So the 25 is everyone gets it, regardless of if you have a half acre, a 0.34 acre, a 10 acre. Everyone gets the 25. The allotment, the 800 millimeter allotment is calculated based on parcel size. So if you're a 0.4 of an acre, you get 0.4 of that 800 millimeters. It gets calculated out that way. If you're a 1.3 acre parcel, then you still get the 800 millimeters, but of course your overall water volume will be more because your land is bigger. So that calculation is done for every property.
Councilor Peak.
I'd like to thank Dave for that clarification, because I think that speaks to a clear indication of a fair and equitable way of looking at water allotment for all properties, which is exactly what Don Richards was speaking to, as were others at the public meeting. So I appreciate that good clarification. I'd like to go to the macro of that. There was a question from, and the lady didn't give her name, but she spoke about an estimate of the costs, and that was the cost of providing the metering and the pump and whatever. And she spoke about GST or exemption or whatever. Could you speak briefly to that, Dave? And I have another question.
Not really sure how to answer that question. As a municipality, when we install services, we follow CRE regulations. And to this point, we charge GST as it is a taxable service.
And if I may, I thought that there was a question from the same individual about our community growth fund. And if you could speak briefly to that, because it's not a bylaw, but we did receive those funds and they were acknowledged. So I don't know if there's something, whether you or Graham would like to speak to that.
Through the mayor, there's not much I can say there. The funding was received. There's no bylaw, from my understanding, that would ever need to be taken into account. It's funding that we received from the provincial government. And yeah, I wasn't entirely sure where the comment came from, but there are no bylaws associated with it.
No, okay. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, in regards to another part of the discussion that was presented in the public portion of this meeting, I do acknowledge that the district, or the domestic second service name is a slightly misnomer. Maybe it's simpler to keep it for the sake of discussion, but in the future, perhaps it's possible to rename it to small acreage irrigation costs or irrigation services or whatever, because it doesn't clearly really speak to exactly what it is. So just an acknowledgement of some of that discussion and from the public's point of view. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'd like to thank the public for bringing up so many good points. We've all been putting a lot of energy. All staff, all council has been working so hard to be considerate of this issue in a fair way, in the most intelligent way possible, approaching it from as many angles as possible. And that's what your voices are here to do, as well as ours, in making these decisions and supporting staff recommendations and putting it all together at the end of the day. For me, I do think the comment from Mr. Smoker about seeing a cost benefit analysis of the cost of metering and that maintenance versus the cost savings potential from water conservation on these properties. This is a number I feel that I would like to have.
So whether or not we meter domestic meters has been a subject of probably the last 5 councils would be my guess. It comes up pretty much every budget cycle. It's something we debate every year, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one. But every year we make the decision to stay the course. This is something we do year after year after year. The benefit of metering agriculture properties, there's no question of the savings of water that has led to. For domestic meters, residential meters, it's not so clear, but each time when we hear examples of that have come up, council's made the decision to stick with it. And, and I'm sure we'll continue having that discussion, but it's, I don't know if it's the decision we want to make today to abandon residential metering or not. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess this question could be for our CAO or maybe Jeremy my question is the comments came out in regards to those properties that did have a blue box that were under 2 meters that didn't have farm status. We also heard from a gentleman at the open house who was under 2 acres, had a blue box with farm status. So I guess my question is, have we reached out to those anomalies? I'm going to call them an anomaly, to speak with them in regards to, we're talking grandfathering. So if I may use that term, that they're grandfathered in into our system. But have we reached out yet to those individuals or those properties? I don't know how many properties there are, but have we reached out at all to make contact with them to discuss moving forward in those regards?
Through the chair, I will let Jeremy talk about the reach out, but I will say that they are anomalies. There's just a few, and we're aware of them. We haven't had any detailed discussions as of late, because the recommended advice, which is before council today, which don't have clearance on, is to actually go to a surface meter. I think if we go to a surface meter approach, finagling some kind of an arrangement where we're not uninstalling their blue box just to put in a new surface meter makes sense to me. Until we get council's clarity on that approach today, our previous direction was these pit meters. So I think if we get that clarity today, we can have more detailed discussions on how to work with those anomalies. We definitely don't want to build policy based on anomalies. So I think they would have to be some one-off conversations on what really makes sense and is reasonable in those situations. But it would still be looking to, if they don't meet that farm status categorization or any of that, still be applying to the same domestic sort of water rates approach for those properties. But Jeremy, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just briefly, thanks for the question. We have been talking to them one-on-one. And the challenge policy wise is the way the bylaws are written. And so the water utility bylaw draws a line at 2 arable acres. And so if a property has below 2 arable acres, but happens to have an ag meter, they're still below 2 arable acres. And so to make a special case for 5 people, let's just say it's 5 in bylaw would, as CAO stat mentions, would not be the best policy perhaps. We have talked to them individually, and there are options for those customers. Generally, they are producing food commercially, and there's some of those properties are very large. They just don't have the 2 arable acres on record, above 2 arable acres on record. So some of them can actually purchase some more arable acres, and then they're over 2 arable acres, and they're not even in the DSS category anymore. So there are some options for those, and we're working with them one-on-one.
This might be more for our corporate officer. If we do have those properties that fall outside of our bylaw, that are less than 2 acres, not those that could buy more arable acres, but those, there was a lady that had a blue box. She was under 2 acres. Is there any way in our bylaw that we could change the bylaw that would indicate those civic property addresses are exempt? Because then we're still following our bylaw, but we've done an exemption within our bylaw to allow for those properties that are already have these blue boxes or these that are under 2 acres. Is that something that can be done? Not
Through the chair to Councillor Patton, I think it could be done, but it's a question of should it be done? And there's a few ways council could address like properties that are an anomaly. You could either do a resolution and that resolution stays on file, or we could look at some type of wording with drafting a bylaw, but I'd probably recommend against that.
Thank you. I was just, if there was a way, perhaps bylaw is not the best way, but if there was a way to do it, that we could, that gives us an option to look at those. Thank you.
So the way I see these properties that are an anomaly, if you will, I mean, the question is, how do we define what's an agricultural property, right? And what isn't? And I know people didn't like it when I said we have to draw the line somewhere. And, you know, we use the government's criteria of farm status because it's objective. And I know that leaves some properties falling behind the cracks, through the cracks, but you know, how do we do it? We've heard lots of feedbacks, but we haven't come up with a workable solution to address that. And anything that we come up with would be subjective. And I don't think it's a good idea to leave it to staff to make a subjective decision on what's a farm and what's not. They need objective criteria to make their decisions based on. So council, we can be subjective. We do it with grant and aid requests, for example. So if we want to get into the area where people come to us every year, every couple of years, and make a case that they're producing significant amounts of agricultural products, however we interpret that, and they should get agricultural rates, then, you know, we can explore that. But I can't really see any way of us putting any kind of policy in place where you can be flexible. Yeah, Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think it's the point of, I think as we look at it, I believe Jeremy indicated that it might have been 5 properties. So it's not properties that we're bringing online. It's already 5 properties. The one gentleman, he was under 2 acres and he did have farm status. And so there was, so that's an anomaly in itself. So what I'm wondering about was with these existing, if it is 5, 6 properties, whatever the case may be, that there has to be an option for those 6 properties. We're not rewriting anything. We're not overriding the province. We're just looking at ways in which they were already receiving the service and how can they maintain that service to move forward that will fall within, or we could make fall within our bylaw.
Councillor Nelson.
Thank you very much. It's regardless. It's all on zoning. If you have if you are zoned agriculture, you have a blue box, you get agricultural water rates. It's got nothing to do with what you're farming. I could have a lawn, a swimming pool, and 3 motorhomes parked on my land. If I'm zoned ag, I get ag water. That's the bottom line. It's the only thing that benefits a farmer. If I'm a bona fide farmer, I'm taxed accordingly by BC assessment. It does not affect my water rates. I'm still allowed the 800 millimeters per arable acre. And if I get over it, the Department of Finance taxes me more. You know, I get charged higher rates. It's got nothing to do with it. Ag is ag. So if you're zoned ag, you're zoned ag. Now, if you have a secondary service on country residential, there's where the conversation is going to come in. What's that rate going to look like? It sure as heck can't look like domestic because they go broke. You know, I had a conversation with a lady. She's got country residential. It's covered in fruit trees. If she hadn't paid domestic rates, she'd have to cut all her trees down. There's no doubt about it, right? And part of her property will go brown. I don't agree with this at all. I live in Garnet Valley. There is not one property in Garnet Valley. It was mentioned at the open house. There's not one property in Garnet Valley that's not interface. Not one. We are all in an interface area. I have people that I know that have under 2 acres that have a domestic second service with irrigation sprinklers on the roofs of their homes, running off that domestic second service because of wildfire situations that we have out there. They're terrified to lose this second service. There's other people in Garnet Valley, as it was mentioned at the open house. The gentleman says, well, I get raw water. Why should I pay domestic rates? Well, there's other people in Garnet Valley that live off little roads. When they twin the system, the district chose not to twin their systems because it was an additional cost to bring it down. One was $30,000. They're still on treated water. You know, so as the mayor said, and I appreciate what the mayor says, this has been going on for 5, 6 years or longer. There's only 1 or 2 people in this room that have any idea the history of this stuff. A lady spoke. She was an elderly woman who spoke so eloquently. She's here, who spoke, and she had a irrigation roll number. They all did once upon a time, but they're gone. You know, I think it's time we, as a community, step up, pay, done. Over, end a conversation. We can discuss the water rates. If you're ag, you're ag. If you're country residential, we can come up with it. But I'm sick of this. I have a blue box. I have a domestic meter. Who paid for it? They did. So did I. All these meters were changing in everybody's houses that are failing rapidly. Who's paying for those? We all are. So are they. Come on, guys, step up, get it over with. I'm done with this. Like on and on we go.
Okay. So I think we're beginning to see why the recommendation is to deal with rates at another time. However, I guess the concern I have here and the question I have is how can you send out a choice letter to people if they don't know what the rates they're going to be paying? What we need to be the two need to go together, no?
Thanks, Mayor Holmes. Yeah, we need to talk about schedule on the choice letter still internally and the report that's going to be going to council on rates. And we'll be seeing what that looks like. Yeah, but we generally agree that they need all the information in order to make a decision.
And so I think it needs to be one decision. We need to decide it all together. I don't see how you can separate the costs from the meter with the rates. And for example, you know, if we do dummy bills for a year, I mean, that's and we only charge the base rate, for example, that year. You know, that's that can have a decision on the cost of the meter, because there's a savings there, right? So to me, I just don't see how we can make a decision on just the cost of the meters without also making a decision on rates. CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the thinking was that if we got the clarity on the meter approach, that would allow us to begin the fabrication of these meters. It's going to take some time to put those together, but people would have a lot of time to choose and respond to that letter, probably the end of the calendar year. And we would get back to people with the clarity before they needed to make that choice by the end of the calendar year on what the rate side looks like. So it would just allow us to get moving on the meter piece and have that clarity of the customer pay. But nobody's going to be forced into making any decisions before they know what the rate looks like. But we'll of course take whatever council wants to do in this regard.
Okay, Councillor Peaks and Councillor Benz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually like the step-through approach, which gives us the option of doing this kind of a decision now. And it was spoken about by staff in the previous discussions that it would take time to roll this out. It could take 3 to 5 years. And we can get some clarity on the costs or how the dummy, whatever way of forecasting it before the end of the year, but the letter wouldn't go out until we were closer to that. So I actually like the two-tier rollout in terms of determining the cost if there was to be a cost done this way. So I did like that. I think it's more understandable. I think it's progressive. It gives an opportunity for staff to get started at getting those things available and rolling the service out in terms of the installation on those.
Thank you, Councillor Bess.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. For me, I keep returning to the cost. If anything, I'm similar to Mr. Van Alphen, where, okay, so maybe let's have the discussion about covering the full cost of the meter. But when the full cost of the meter to the district, which is every single one of us, comes to $675,000 plus the maintenance and repairing fees, it just makes me really question what we are doing and the cost of that. And I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge that, like, to me, it seems that this policy from council was decided on in 2020. Is that correct? It was 2019. It was before the water master plan of 2021 was complete. So at this point, for me personally to decide for a water meter to either be paid in part or in full by council, before we have a policy on our water rates, is again forcing something through in the wrong order. And I'm feeling less comfort with that. And I think as legislators that we should be having our consultation processes and policy following in the correct order and not one coming after the other.
Councillor Nelson.
Thank you. First of all, I apologize, Mr. Mayor, for getting dramatic. I care a lot because I went through this with blue boxes. And I'm sure there's only one staff member here that probably remembers my rants in those days too. And I was totally against them. Totally against. Why? Because no one south of us has any irrigation meters, and why should I be subject to being restricted to amount of water when everybody else down south has more water than me? And, you know, I'm a farmer. I'm trying to be competitive too, right? So same thing back in the day. And I think Mr. Vandermeulen can correct me if I'm wrong. We did blue boxes. We did domestic water meters. We got down to the 2 acres and under and said, It's trivial. It's minute. And that's the bottom line. That's why they never went in. And now if we want them, and I got a blue box, and for 1 year, I did not pay. I paid my base rate, right? And then they came to me and said, oh my God, you're so far over. If we're charging, you would have had to pay X. The meter was a really great educational tool. I have downsized nozzles. I've done all sorts of things to try to keep my irrigation below my allotment, so I don't have to pay a penalty, which is great. Again, it's an educational tool. If we want to be educated, then pay for these people to have their meters. They can educate themselves over a period of time, a year, one season. They'll know what they've used. So I think there's a win-win for everybody. If it's all about water conservation, then we all have to put money in the game here, I think. So on the rates, golly, that'll be another passionate discussion, I'm sure. But today I'm here to talk about who pays for the meters. And I think it should be us. And I think there's a possibility that we could stretch this over a 5-year period. And, again, even my water meter on Garnet Valley Road has been wiped out twice, like destroyed. And staff have come out diligently, immediately, and repaired it. At my cost? No, yours. We all work together. So let's work together and get this resolved. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll be the unpopular one here. I'll make a case of why people should pay something for meters. Probably not the people in this room, but there are a lot of properties here who simply do not need this second meter. They don't need it. But if you give it to them free, of course they're going to take it. And so if you're going to install a meter and you don't have to pay them, it means everybody else is paying for it. So if you make a contribution, you try to find a fair price, and I think $1,000 is a fair price. It's the same price as a developer would have to pay to put a meter into a new build, a new home. And as one person who wrote into us said, for 4 years, from 2011 to 2014, there was no invoicing at all for the second services. So all that water was free. And this person said that could be considered a fair exchange for the cost of a meter for $1,000. That's not those aren't my words. That's what somebody wrote. I would also suggest that if we go to 1-year dummy bills, so people could learn and go through that education process, which Councillor Van Elfen spoke of, which we all did with our domestic meters, gave us time to put in drip lines or whatever. And you're not paying for that year with the dummy bills. That's also a contribution that it's money you would save. And it's just a way to make sure that the people who really need that second meter are the ones who are doing it. And you just don't take one because, well, you have nothing to lose, but you don't really need it. And I think we need to get away from this thinking that all these 240 properties are the same, because they're not. They are not. There are some properties who are just, using it to fill their swimming pools. Oh, we know. Councillor Patton and Councillor Trainer.
Thank you, Your Worship. My perspective on this came with our new pop-up dog park. Our new pop-up dog park is 1 acre. So when you look at the top of Peach Orchard and you look at that, 75% of the properties we're talking about, 180 of these properties are the same size or smaller than our dog park. So I agree with you. I truly do. I have fruit trees. I fall in the 1,900 people. I have fruit trees. My wife has a domestic food production, formerly known as a garden. I water my grass. My grass is turning brown because I know my allotment. I know that I will pay $1.89 once I hit my allotment, and I always hit my allotment, and I always pay the higher water bills. So as a citizen of Summerland, I'm singled out as one of those that has to pay. Can I go now to the district and say, I want a free domestic second service? Why can't I? Why can't I? If I have to pay for my water through my domestic meter, I feel that you want to talk fairness, that's fair. We're not saying and I pay would be the same as whatever. But when I take a look, and I think what really hit me was when I looked at our dog park, and I thought, okay, there's an acre. We put a house, we put a driveway, we put some outbuildings. Why do I have to subsidize? And that's exactly, Councillor Van Elfen, everybody pays. Why would I have to pay another $59 for a year to subsidize? And I've been quiet through this whole thing, but I'm afraid that I will support the $1,000.
Councillor Trainer. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Councillor Patton. I appreciate your passion. But let's remember, it's not me, it's them. At the public meeting that said they're grandfathered. You're not. You're too young to be grandfathered. Oh, you are a grandfather, sorry. And who paid for your meter? Everybody. The whole community paid. And when they replace your meter because it's wore out, they're going to pay again.
If I may, I got a meter. You're absolutely right. I got a meter. You got a meter. Everybody got their residential water meter. We did get the meter, Marty. And we're talking 240 properties that the rest of Summerland have to subsidize. That's what you were asking us to do.
Councillor Trainer.
All right, I'm still making my mind up, but I have gone back and forth and back and forth. And the 4 hour session that we had the other night, where I got to hear from all the residents, was very helpful. I discussed this a little bit on the phone with the mayor yesterday, but right now I'm tending to agree with Councillor Van Elfen, because this has been going on a long time, and there's been so much confusion. Like, we've made one plan, then we've changed it, then we've made another, we've sent out letters and we've changed our mind. And I just think that everybody owns what I would call a mistake on, and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm putting the finger on previous councils, previous residents, us, everybody. I think this situation was just not handled because nobody really knew what to do. And what I learned from attending that meeting is that every one of these situations is so different. And so it's so difficult to apply the same principles to all these 240 residents. So I think that as a group, they're a unique situation. And so sometimes, when we make a mistake or we don't know what to do, I think we just, as a district and a community, come together and just spread out the cost and we absorb this. Is it necessarily the right answer? No, I don't have a right answer. I'm just leaning towards this as being one of the ways to resolve this and move on. I don't know about the rates. That I agree, that's a whole other issue. But I just think that there's been too many things back and forth and you know, everybody's always trying to dig up what we said before. And I just think that us covering it is the best way to go forward. That's where I'm sitting right now.
Councillor Van Elsen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And back to the mayor's comments about the person that wrote in or contacted you about the years that they weren't charged any money. And you're right. I remember those years. And I point my finger at one person. That was our financial officer at the time. It was not council's fault. They didn't even know. So it was staff's fault, guaranteed. And because I was here. And, you know, so the problem I'm having, the worst problem I'm having is every year, every council, we keep bringing this up, bringing this up, bringing this up. And these poor people are going like, holy Christ, this again? You know, like we got to put some closure to this, you know, once and for all, I think. And I think the fair thing to do is like Councillor Trainer said, is that let's do it. You know, we don't have to do this all over 1 year. And there's no way we're going to install all these meters unless we hire 2 or 3 contractors, and that'll even cost us more money. You know, so let's do it. We do it ourselves. We spread it over a 5-year period and we can absorb the taxes that way. Thank you.
We need a motion on the table. Councillor Van Elsen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Option 3, can you bring that up on the screen, please, Mrs. Corporate Officer?
Building the motion, just a few more moments. Yeah, thank you.
Is that the motion you want, Councillor Van Elsen?
just reviewing it, that domestic second service customers pay zero for the meter installation with a full cost estimate of $675,000 to be covered by the water rate increase of 10.23% over a 5-year period. And that staff be directed to explore the administration of a mock billing period with the cost. Can somebody help me with that? Apportionment options being brought back to council through a rate and billing review so the mock billing, could you please add that it's for one irrigation season? And that council adopt the domestic second service metering program as described in this report, understanding that a future report will cover domestic second service rates and billings.
We need a seconder for that, please. Councillor Trainer. Okay, discussion. Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question to the mover and seconder. Do you want it covered by water rate increase or do you want it covered by the community growth fund?
That's a really good question. The community growth fund, I know we've had discussions. I don't know if you were here at the time, Councillor Peak, but we had a discussion about that and the money was put into a short-term investment. And some of that money was allocated for the sewer project up towards Deer Ridge. So that was a conversation that we had and I think we agreed upon that and that money was set aside for a while, collecting some interest. This here, I have no problem spreading over a 5-year period by users.
Councillor Trainer.
Question for our financial officer. Just to be certain, is it possible to do that increase over 5 years, like spread it out? And how would that look?
So through the mayor, it is possible. To answer your second question, what that would look like, I think a lot of it is going to depend on that the rate increase itself is easy. It looks like it's about, what, 2% a year. We're probably going to run into instances where our expenses are probably going to be higher than money coming in. So we'll probably have to utilize a reserve to kind of balance things out in those years where the revenue coming in is higher than what was expensed. We would put that away, and in the following year, if we spent more on installing services than the revenue coming in, we would offset those. But at the end of the term, over a 5-year period, the intent would be to basically be at a break even.
And one more quick question. If a grant was to come up, I'm not like, who knows what kind of grants are going to be coming forward in the next while. We could always apply, if it's a water related grant, we could always apply and perhaps apply that to this project.
Through the mayor, correct.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the discussion about whether all ratepayers would pay or to use these funds from the Growing Communities Fund is a really valuable one. I tried to think of the Growing Communities Fund as an investment for Summerland's future. And that's why some of it is going towards the pier for all Summerlanders, so we can replace that in kind. And then as well to have a notion of investment in our future that can bring future tax dollars to our base that help us to grow. So for those reasons, I would think that a rate increase that was apportioned to all users would be more sensible on this issue than utilizing the Growing Communities Fund, which would benefit all Summerlanders. Whereas this is kind of correcting a past wrong. It's not future thinking. So I'd rather the Growth Community Fund be future thinking.
So for myself, I might be in favor of this, but I might not. I think I personally need to know what the rates are going to be before I think we can make a decision. I don't feel I can separate one without the other. The two go hand in hand as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not prepared to support it at this time until I know that. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You make a very valid point. Would you be more comfortable if I amended my motion to the first paragraph and the first paragraph only?
I still think we need to know both. Councillor Betts.
I agree. This is why I've been talking about wanting to have a fulsome understanding of all aspects. I know this discussion is about the meter. I understand that fully. But governing our community, it is not only about a piece of hardware. It is about the whole picture.
Councillor Van Elsen.
And I appreciate those comments very much, and I don't disagree, but can we give these people some assurance that the meters will be installed eventually at no cost to them? Water rates, I agree, we can have a discussion, but can we at least give them some kind of resolve that they're not going to pay for the meters, and then we can have the discussion on water rates?
Don't have to ask myself, I guess. I don't know how much reassurance is if they know they don't have to pay for a water meter, but they don't know what they're going to pay what rates they're going to pay. I don't really know what kind of reassurance that is going to be. Right? Councillor Shane.
If this 10% is spread out over 5 years, that's about 2% a year. Looking back over we know this year was 5, right? Like, could we get an estimate? Like, it would not, at 2%, it would not be a large amount. What I'm saying is given that if we do 2% a year, I would be comfortable with that. Without having to know all of the, exact numbers. Because again, we're just prolonging this. And I think I agree with what Councillor Van Elfen said, that we need to, we can continue debating it, and a wholesome discussion would be really great, but we've, again, been working at this for a very, very long time. And I think that there is no exact right answer. We just have to kind of navigate our way through it and try to pick a solution that works.
I think we need to know, are we talking about agricultural rates or are we talking about residential rates? Because we have the conversation every year about residential metering, and we're going to have it again. And if we just go install all these meters and then we decide that they're residential meters, that could change everything. Or if they're, I don't, until we nail down, the whole residential meter question, I don't really, I just can't see. I think it's a waste of everybody's money. Councillor Peak, CAO sat first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, we wouldn't be installing any meters until 2024. So none of that would happen this year. Just for clarity, none of that would be happening in 2023.
So when the tax increase ticks in, or the water rate increase tick in, not till?
Well, based on this motion, we'd start to see the water rate increase, water rate increase starting in 2024.
Okay, Councillor Peak, then Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you. I'm not very comfortable of putting another 2% on top of the discussion that we have on general water rates in our budget every year. So then I'm adding 2% for 240 people or whatever the number is. And then we have a rate increase because we're looking towards the full structure of all our consumers, all our residents in the community. And I'm not really comfortable at adding another 2% for a portion of the population.
Counselor Van Elfen.
I'll come back to me in a bit.
Well, there's probably nobody. Come back to Counselor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I was just thinking about, we doubled the bulk water rates this past year, knowing that it really was out of whack with what everybody else is paying for the majority of these properties that are smaller. But what I'm kind of grasping at here is that $675,000 is just a huge cost. And every single thing that we're doing this year has increased in price by 100,000 here and 60,000 here and 400,000 here. I mean, everything is just accelerating so much. And to me, this just needs to be said that we are bringing in additional income on this water at this time. So we are charging for water. So doing a rate review looks at that. That's outside of metering, but we are bringing in finance, bringing in money for water at this time. And I just think it needs to be said in the context of spending $675,000 on 240 meters.
Counselor Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to agree with Counselor Peak. I think that doing a 2% for 240 over 5 years, I can't support that.
Okay, so unless somebody wants to put a motion to defer, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion that's on the table? This one, yeah, the one you brought forward. 2 in favor, Counselor Van Elfen, Counselor Trainer, all opposed. So that's defeated. So what do we want to do? Counselor Peak.
I would bring back the motion as presented in the package.
Okay, my motion's on the floor. And any discussion? Counselor Van Elfen.
So we're back to square one.
Yep.
100% back to square one. They pay and we got ours for free. Okay, just wanted to get that clear in my head.
CO stat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarity and through to Councillor Van Alphen, all residents in the community did receive a domestic water meter for free. These are second water meters for individuals that already have a water meter, which they did receive for free.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you. They didn't put these lines in. We did. The district did many years ago. And I didn't think I was debating with you today, but anyways, they didn't put it in. So why are they going to be responsible is what I'm saying. So it's got nothing to do that. Yeah, I received a free meter. So did they. I got a free blue box. So did other farmers. They got a second service said by staff, grandfathered.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't necessarily want to get into the whole grandfather thing, but there are 190 properties out there used to have a second service as well, and they weren't given the option of being grandfathered. Anyway, I won't be able to support this either for the exact same reason that I wouldn't be able to support the last one. I just can't separate the cost of the meter issue without also considering rates. Councillor Peak.
Oh, I'm still on, sorry. I really do appreciate the fact that it is not quite right what has gone on over 8 or 9 or 10 years. And I wasn't on council when some of this happened. But I really feel that the opportunity to finish it off. And even though people will be paying $1,000 for a meter, and it's above ground, it's not in ground, so it's not an extra, it's not more cost than we need, but we're going to receive the opportunity for metering water. No, it's not fair. And you can just fall on the side of it should be more fair for you folks, for the people that got grants before. I make a decision at this point, sitting as a counselor at this table this year. You can think that I'm wrong, and some of you will, but this is the decision, and I can make this decision. The mayor is saying he would prefer to see the costs. I think a mock billing period will give us an opportunity to that. I better understand the apportionment of base watering costs with the discussion that we had through Don Richards' question and our treasurer's explanation. I'm more comforted with that in terms of the estimate of more equitable distribution of those costs. So I'm prepared to make this decision, and I will vote for this resolution.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I'll call the question. All in favor? Councillor Peak, Councillor Patton. All opposed? Some opposed. That's defeated. So we're at somewhat of a stalemate. Sorry. No, let's get through this. Councillor Van Alphen.
Yeah, I'll throw another one on the table. Are you more happy? Would you be more pleased if it came out of the Community Growth Fund? Okay.
Councillor Betts.
Okay, I'm just going to try and find a way that I propose that staff come to council with a water rate review, as well as a cost benefit analysis for the meters versus the savings and the cost of the meter all together.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Corporate officer, did you capture that? Does that cover it, Councillor Betts?
Just double checking, one moment. Yes.
To the CAO, does this provide direction that staff can work with?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it'd be helpful to hear a bit more from council what cost benefit analysis parameters would look like, partly because, inherent to any cost benefit analysis would be amount of water used, which we don't have because there's no water meters on these second services. So I don't know if there's other ways or kinds council's envisioning that we could put together a cost benefit analysis regarding the water meters.
Councillor Betts?
May I ask a member of the gallery for their input? He seems to have put some thought into this question. Is that allowed?
If all of council agrees.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Smoker.
Councillor Van Elfen? Yeah, okay. Mr. Smoker?
You guys are on now? Great, thanks. So just to point to that, and we heard that it iterated at the open house as well, that people were asked, well, how much water are we using? And city were like, we have no idea, there's no meter. 2/3 again of municipalities in BC aren't metered, and they don't seem to have a problem estimating water usage. So you can say, okay, the water usage is assumed to be this amount, and then apply that in your cost benefit analysis. And to clarify the cost benefit analysis, I would find it most beneficial to break it into a ratio of water saved per dollar spent. And then you can use that ratio and stack it against any other capital projects or any other initiatives that the city does. And estimating water usage per arable acre is pretty easy because you guys do it to create your bulk rates.
Does that work?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, Councillor Betts, go ahead.
To our CAO, just and our Director of Utilities, trying to find, to me as a resident and a legislator, the cost benefit analysis to me comes at the cost of potentially $675,000 on the high end, versus the opportunity for savings due to water conservation. So for example, the egg boxes, you said that it demonstrated a clear reduction in water use with time. That might be a useful comparison. Additionally, I believe you brought to us at an earlier meeting, I was searching through the agendas. Man, I was looking for this doc, but I thought that we got kind of tried to do a lot size, property size comparison, which of course are inaccurate, but say a 0.5 acre lot, a 1 acre lot of properties that are already metered to have an idea of water usage on those properties. So that would kind of help propel us towards a cost benefit analysis. Can we generate savings in our water system because of all the treatment that we're using, the chemicals, the cost of our pipes and meters themselves? Are we generating savings by using less water in our systems? That's my cost benefit analysis to offset a capital cost of $675,000. And this is the discussion we didn't want to have about the value of a meter or not, but this is the discussion that I do want to have. Because everything's getting more expensive, infrastructure is getting more expensive, and labor is getting more expensive. So I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry, not supposed to apologize. But I'd like to have that discussion.
So just a suggestion, rather than a cost benefit analysis, what about the business case for water meters? Does that work for both staff and Councillor Betts? Councillor Betts.
Cost benefit can, I mean, there's opportunities to bring in the benefits of biodiversity and green growing that are outside of business numbers. But I realize we're a corporation, but we have values. So.
Councillor Van Elfen.
That's why I go back to the free water meters. For the fact of the matter is then we'll be able to have some cost, some ideas on how much water is being used. If people have water meters, they're going to be more conscientious. Right now, they don't have water meters. We doubled their rates. We give them a water meter and they're going to watch their consumption. I remember when domestic meters went in and blue boxes went in. I think the finance department had a bit of a sticker shock back in the day going, oh God, we're going to have to raise rates because they're not using as much water. So I think it's a win-win for the community if we just buck up and get this done.
CO stat.
If it's all right with the mayor, can I comment on what Councillor Van Alphen has put forward from a staff perspective?
Certainly.
So if, I guess I would dial it back to say the original policy intent of this initiative as we understand it, and it goes back for a deep history, a proud history of DSS. The intent is to either decommission these second services or to have the water metered. And staff had put forward advice and maybe cost sharing, and I think council's leaned hard away from that at this time, at least based on what we have heard so far in the motions that have been voted on. From a staff perspective, the benefit to what Councillor Van Alphen is saying, and a pro in terms of that approach, in just paying for the entire district, the district paying for the entire portion of the meter costs, is we can do that very quickly. We could probably, between staff and maybe some contractor support, turn that whole program quite quickly and do a lot of installations very quickly in 2024 rather than doing too much staggering over time. And the original staff advice was actually to use water reserves. Now, council, I think, has gone toward more of the option of looking at a rate increase to balance across the board on that. But there is water reserves. And if we look at this as a capital infrastructure project that we're now paying for, if that's the way council is thinking about it, then we wouldn't need to also have that across the board 10% increase over 5 years. We would just say water reserves, pay for all the meters to put them in, do it as quickly as possible. That takes the whole metering conversation off the table. The principle or the philosophy then is water meters should be installed and we're paying for them. What staff heard in the session, which was enlightening on June 6th, many people came to the microphone and said, I don't have a problem with paying for metered water. What I'm struggling with is paying for the district's water meter. So if that is a theme that people are saying they don't have a problem with paying for metered water, then if we do all these district, if the district pushes forward on a one big drop to get these meters done from a water reserves perspective, the only real question that has to be resolved is the price question. So I guess I'd just circle back to saying if we wanted to rethink that approach, that would allow staff to do a lot of work quickly. It benefits getting clarity for us because the policy intent at the end of the day is just to have the meters either decommissioned or have those lines metered. And it gives price certainty, at least on the meter cost, gets that out at the hair of the folks that are in the room today and others that aren't. And then we just come back to council with that question on how we do the rate piece. But it will be built largely upon the domestic rates and associated allocation. That would be our starting point. But anyways, that's just a commentary from a staff perspective on what's being proposed, I think, from Councillor Van Alphen.
Okay, thank you. I mean, from what I heard is, people don't have a problem paying for metered water, depending on what the rate is. And so I just can't separate the two. Councillor Van Alphen, then Councillor.
I appreciate your input, CO Stat. I truly do. I think it has to start with the meters. And if we can take the money out of the reserves and accelerate the installation of these meters, I think that it's the right approach. Again, we got to go back. I have to go back to the ag zone. If you're zoned agricultural, you will pay agricultural rates. If you're zoned country residential or something else, I think that's where the conversation is going to have to come in. There's going to be I think a blended rate. Domestic, I don't think you could irrigate your area on domestic, but you don't deserve ag rates either, possibly. So something in the middle, compromise. But I appreciate our CEO's approach. I think, I was thinking of spreading it out over a 5-year, 6-year period to try to be, less impact on the taxpayer, but I like your approach of taking it out of the reserves.
Councillor Peak.
Before I speak, possibly, Mr. Mayor, could you recognize Jeremy Starvold? He may have something that's cogent.
Okay, Mr.
And then
Storm,
I'll
thank you. Thank you, Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarity for Councillor Van Elfen. The way the bylaws are written, zoning has no bearing on water rights in Summerland. The water bylaw is very clear that agricultural water is for properties that are over 2 arable acres or a class 9 farm. So zoning in Summerland, agricultural or the province with the agricultural land reserve, those are not mentioned in the water bylaw. The water bylaw is based on arable acres, 2 acres or more has access to ag water, 2 acres and less. If installed before July 1st, 2015, has a DSS, has access to the DSS rate. So the zoning, just point of clarity there, because I hear that quite often from customers too. The water bylaw does not recognize the zone.
As more than one commissioner on the ALC has told me, it's the agricultural land reserve, not the agricultural water reserve. So it's not as simple as that. Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. I understood that, but I appreciate the restatement of it. And I also appreciate the staff view through our CAO Graham Stat that the use of water reserve as opposed to spreading up 2% over a year to cover this cost. I would be more comfortable with that because our water reserve is for capital infrastructure water. The pumps for that service is part of that cost. I could see a motion coming forward that speaks to using those funds for the district to pay for the pumps for these properties. And I could see spreading it over 2 years because I'm not sure whether the cost to get contractors, I'm not quite clear. And perhaps the question would be, is it less cost to bring contractors in or have staff do it so we can get it done faster? So then we have metering and everybody would have a better idea of their consumption on the water, whatever it is, because if you're going to meter it, it's going to be what it is. So I would appreciate doing a motion that speaks to the cost being paid by the district, but paid by the water reserve. So I wouldn't mind some other comments on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I guess before going down that route, I would want to know what impact does it have on our asset management and for other planned capital water projects. I don't know if that's something that can be told now, but it might require a future staff report. Councillor Trainer.
Dave, do you know what's in the water reserve right now?
I think that wasn't on. Through the mayor, yes, in looking at our 5-year capital plan, at the end of 2027, our projected balance is 743,000. We, by the looks of it, looking at 24, we'd be at about 167,000. So we would probably have to move some projects around and or push them out or drop them in order to be able to cover that full cost. But in terms of the 5-year plan, there is sufficient funding.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do like this approach. I think it's, as Councillor Peak has mentioned, I think this is maybe a more equitable way of doing this. And then I still think, going back to the mayor's statement, to be honest with you, Mr. Mayor, I still think there's going to be people there, even with a free meter, are going to, if they don't need it, they're going to opt out because of the rates, right? Right now, they know what they're paying. And with the meter, they may opt out anyways. So I don't know. I think it's the way to go. I think this, going through the reserves is the appropriate way. And I don't know if corporate officer could create some type of motion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor already. So we'd have to vote on that before somebody wants to bring forward another motion. And this was, so replace business case with business analysis. So we'll have to vote on this motion one way or another. If we don't want this, and we want to bring another one forward, then we need to defeat this. All right, everybody clear as mud there? Yeah, okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Counts their bets. All opposed? That motion's defeated. Okay, should we try again? Ain't pretty. Councillor Tran.
So maybe back to that one that we had up previously. Kendra, if you have that one.
Number one.
Sorry, it would have been option 3. The motion that Marty made. Or sorry, Councilman. But instead of paying through water user rates, we would pay through the reserve. Does that capture the right intention? Okay. Okay. And to confirm, Dave, you did say that this is possible, although some projects may need to be shuffled. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Question through to staff. When do we think we might get the future report covering the rates?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Mayor. Looking at Jeremy, I think we had talked about September, October, actually, Dave, right? September. That's what we're targeting.
Okay, motions. Did somebody second this? Councillor, okay, Councillor Van Elsen, motions on the floor. Any discussion? Councillor Betts.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to hear from you because, you've been somebody who's been very pro metering, whereas I've been taking a slightly different philosophical approach. So at this point, is your holdback wanting to have the full, the more fulsome look at our water rate review before you would support this? Or are we looking to just go forward with the meters and then review? Essentially, that seems to be the option, correct?
Well, I guess there's no point sending out choice letters now. I mean, what's the process if this passes? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we still would send out choice letters. Some people, may initially indicate that they would still like to proceed, but then as we come forward with, the costing on the rates, they could change their mind. But it still allows us to get an idea of numbers. Before this was paused the last time, we actually had a number of people come forward and say, actually, I'd like you to decommission my meter. So we, some people have them, don't use them. Others are already waffling on the idea of with the doubling of the base rate. They have already sort of started to think maybe they don't want to have those meters any longer. So I think that it still would be good to have the choice letters go out. One option could be, if we get the clarity from council today on a motion like this, is we could just delay the sending of that choice letter until we have the other conversation with council. And closer to the rate piece in September, and that would still give people a couple months after that conversation. We could put more information in that choice letter, but it allows us to get the fabrication of the meters and this sort of thing underway so that we don't lose time.
So then to Councillor Betts, that I'd be more comfortable with that. I don't see how you can send a letter to people saying, well, we don't know how much you're going to pay, but you're going to pay. Like, oh, what is that, right? So that's the issue I have. Councillor Pete.
Well, I agree with still sending out a choice letter because we need to, we only have a portion of these people here today. I'm not sure who's going to listen to our council meeting. We need to continue to have the communication with the people that are involved in this situation. And it was always expected that we would be further down the line in the discussion, that it wouldn't be issued probably until close to the end of the year anyway. So I'm comfortable with that, and I can move with it coming from the Water Capital Reserve to agree with this resolution.
Okay. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is to Jeremy. So Jeremy, right now there's only in our water bylaw, there's agricultural and there's domestic water. That's the only two rates that we're looking at.
Thank you. Through the mayor, those two rates are in the bylaw, but there's also half a dozen other rates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, no further discussion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Jeez, guys. Opposed? Councillor Betts and Patton opposed. Motion carries. We'll take a 10-minute break. Okay, welcome back. Right now, we're on to the peer update. Director of Community Services, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide council an update on the peer removal and replacement, to review peer replacement concepts, and to receive direction on next steps. As outlined in the council report, after ministry approvals for pier deck removal was issued, district crews attempted to remove the decking, which proved to be an extremely challenging task. Therefore, it is now being incorporated into the piling removals. The muscle survey is happening today, and the piling removal is slated tomorrow through this week with the goal of being completed by the July long weekend. Since the council report was written, staff have received an update from our qualified environmental professional on Friday that there have been a few changes to the muscle salvage window. The new window will only allow us to install the new pilings until approximately October 15th based on Okanagan Lake historical water temperatures. The new window differs from the previous 6-month window, which would have allowed for piling installation until early 2024. Once the pilings are in, the above water construction can happen at any time. Given the new timing window, we will need to move very quickly to attempt to meet the deadlines and requirements for this year. However, it'll still be dependent on how quickly the pier can be designed, completion of environmental reporting, ministry review of design, engineering requirements for approvals, completion of required studies, obtaining Section 11 permit, and contract piling installation. Should this not all be completed by October 15th, the next timing window for piling installation will be July 2024. The ministry approvals for a pier replacement of similar size and use to the existing pier will be fairly straightforward, such as the basic pier we are proposing in this report. Additional pier enhancements will require further studies, and the process will have a longer approval timeline. This likely wouldn't be able to start construction this year on an enhanced pier. We have Joe, Director of Works and Infrastructure, available here to answer any questions related to pier removal and construction that council will have. The district staff engaged Urban Systems to provide 3 pier replacement conceptual designs. These concepts bundle certain options to produce estimated costs. However, features can be added or removed from any concept, or other concept could be envisioned. At this time, these concepts are not finalized and instead aim to foster discussion and consideration of council. Urban Systems have provided estimated costing for replacing the pier with all existing features, including wood pilings, to demonstrate a baseline for a like-for-like pier. They have included a basic concept, which is essentially replacing all components of the pier, but with the inclusion of steel pilings, which is highly recommended to maximize the longevity of the pier, as well as electrical conduit for the ease of adding lighting in the future. The enhanced and premium concepts showcase examples of what the pier could look like with additional features and the associated cost estimates. The Rotary Club is proposing to connect with community stakeholders and residents to build fundraising strategies in September and anticipate having funds raised or committed by March 2024 to support pier enhancements. And I understand they already have a golf tournament underway for fundraising efforts. It is recommended that council direct staff to proceed with the design and construction of the basic pier concept to expedite the project and attempt to meet the October 15th deadline for 2023 piling installation. And in parallel, initiate community engagement to gather input on specific features for the enhancement and enjoyment of the pier, which would be considered to be added in future phases. These enhancements would be subject to permitting approvals submitted after the basic pier construction. The engagement can be in the form of a survey conducted over the summer months where the community identifies which enhancements they recommend as priorities. Staff would then forward the survey results to the Rotary Club to consider as part of their fundraising campaign. A pier fundraising update could come to council this fall. Should council want any upgrades or changes to the basic pier concept to be designed in the first phase, such as different railings or decking, It is required that council confirm that today so staff can alter their plan submission to the province. Any enhancements to the basic concept and footprint will add time to the approval process and cost. The urban systems team working on the concept has been landscape architect Catherine Barris and landscape designer Rosanna Ho. Catherine is out of the country this week, so Rosanna will be leading the presentation and going through the concepts with council. Mr. Mayor, before we move on to the presentation, do you want to pause for initial questions or would you like to jump right into the concept presentation?
Anybody have any initial questions? We'll just jump right into the deep end then.
Okay, we have Rosanna, who is going to be sharing her screen remotely and going through the presentation. And Mr. Mayor, would you like Rosanna to go through all concepts and have questions at the end, or would you like her to pause at each concept for questions?
I guess for the sake of time, let's just do them all at the end. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah, okay. So just at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Rosanna, over to you.
Thank you, Laurie. Good afternoon, everyone. So I am Rosanna Ho from Urban Systems. Thank you for the introduction. I'll jump straight into the presentation. Great. And can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Great. So we've been asked to prepare 3 concept options, and they are the basic, enhanced, and premium. I won't go through reading each one, but here is a high-level list of what each option entails. So first up, we'll have a site analysis of what currently exists. There is a wooden archway entrance with wooden railing. There is 1 seating bench and 2 swim ladders. There's great 360-degree views along and at the end of the pier. And the deck elevation is at approximately 343.5 meters. And the lake bottom elevation at the end of the pier is, by educated estimates, 339 meters, but that is yet to be confirmed. So before we go into the actual options, we just have a few points on the water levels and depths that we're designing for. So we looked at past water levels between 1943 and 2021, and that fluctuated between 340.82 meters to 343.25 meters. But looking forward to climate variability, we are going to be designing for lake levels, not flood, lake levels of between 341.4 meters and 343.6 meters from now to 2055. So it is likely that the pier will need to be raised, although this will be addressed in detailed design and not determined now. So the current pier elevation is at 343.5 meters. The other point that we need to keep in mind is there is a safety standard provided by the Life Saving Society of Canada for jumping activities from a surface more than 1 meter above water level, that it requires a water depth of 3.8 meters. And the water depths that we will be able to achieve will be confirmed in future studies with a clear understanding of what the lake bottom is and detailed design. So here we have the basic option. I will start with a design overview of the big moves of the 3 options, and then this will be followed by a comparison of details and materials across the concepts. So the basic option is replacing all the components of the previous pier, including the swim ladders. It will be with steel pilings instead of wood pilings. There would be There would be an added electrical conduit for future lighting on the pier. The seating will be embedded in the wood railings, and there will be rope and buoys around the swim area to prevent interactions between swimmers and motorized watercraft. The rope and buoys will be consistent across all options. The enhanced option will have an added shade structure with standard designed benches and solar lighting fixed to the shade structure. There'll be added water access elements, including aquatic stairs, a jump board, and a step down platform. And then the premium option will have a custom shade structure with a custom island bench seating arrangements. There will be LED strip lighting embedded in the railings, and there will be a raised platform seating structure on the north end with a climbing wall on the side. The water access elements will include a floating dock, in addition to swim ladder and aquatic stairs. And then it'll also incorporate some play elements, including a slide and a rope swing. And these features are pictured on here. There is also an option, if required, to phase the construction in the premium concept. Phase 1 would look at the existing footprint with the shade structure. Phase 2, the floating dock and the ramp. And phase 3, the raised platform seating structure with the climbing wall. So now we'll look into the comparison of some materials and details across the different concept options. So right here, we're looking at pure construction. And so the first price we have for doing pure construction, the same as the existing methods, which would be wood pilings, would have a cost of $605,600. This will give an estimated service life of 10 to 25 years. And this is using untreated wood piles because of environmental regulations. All wood going submerged into the lake must be untreated wood. And though we can use treated wood frame and decking, so treated wood will have more longevity, and you can see here that 10 to 25 years is much less than the 50 to 70 years service life of steel piles. And the short longevity comes from using untreated wood going into fresh water. And then as we move on to the basic pure construction, or the pure construction for the basic option, would be steel piles with wood frame and decking. That brings us to $701,100. The high level spec that we use to get the costing is 12-inch steel piles. And then when we move on to the enhanced option, it would be with steel piles, metal frame, and wood decking. That brings us to $828,700. So the benefit of using a metal frame is that decking can be replaced without affecting the structural component. Next, we have the premium option, and it's the same cost, steel piles, metal frame with through flow decking. Notice that the cost is the same. So through flow decking also can be replaced without affecting the structural component, and it also has the added benefit of mitigating shadowing impacts on the marine environment. There's also an option of composite decking that would have the same cost as wood and through flow decking, but we're not considering it here because it has more of a slip hazard and it's not as durable as a decking material for commercial public use. And next, we have a comparison of the railings. Existing would be wood railings at roughly $25,000. A basic will have wood railings with embedded seating, which brings us to just under $50,000. I'll move on. And then we have wood with cable, which brings us to roughly $39,000. The benefit of cable is that it prevents children from climbing through because the cable would be too small for the head to go through. But if people really want it, they can still climb over. Another added benefit it has over wood railings is that it allows more visual connection to the water. And then finally, we have the premium prefabricated metal option. So this one can meet bridge design standards for safety or guardrails. And it prevents people from climbing over. I'm not sure if you can see in the picture, but the prefabricated metal is curved in an angle where it makes it difficult to use the horizontal bars as a climbing step. And next we have a few points on design considerations surrounding safety and risk. On the left here is a graph that overlays the lake levels for the years 2020 to 2021 over the deck elevation and the approximate lake bottom. And what it graphically shows that is one scenario it shows is that when the water level is at 342 meters, which could be achieved with high probability over the summer season, the water depth is a little under 3 meters. So there are design moves that we can do in detailed design to make sure we reach the required water depth during use. But beyond that, there are also design considerations for risk management. There are other considerations for risk management, such as having an inspection and maintenance policy, making sure that all the pieces are safe, and more importantly, having general signage at the entrance, including general water safety guidelines, known common risks of the area with regards to water levels, skill and age recommendations for use, noting that there is no lifeguard on duty, perhaps parental supervision requirements, rules and expectations. And that's just a preview of what could be included. And next we have a cost comparison breakdown. So a few points on a Class D estimate and the costs. These prices here include a 40% contingency, which will account for general engineering, design, and construction. The enhanced and premium options may also require additional costs for permitting and specialist consulting, and the figures are rounded up to the nearest 100. I would pause on these slides for review, and then we can come back to it when there are questions going into specific items.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, any questions? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So our 40% contingency, is that being taken up or is that being used for design considerations?
What do you mean it's taken up? Sorry.
Are you using the 40% contingency that you have in these numbers as part of the cost for design? Or is this a contingency as a contingency for overruns?
It would account for both. So it includes the cost of design as far as it would be for a general project without any huge deviation from normal scope. And it also mildly accounts for price fluctuations. So for the 40% contingency is industry standard that we would use for a Class D cost estimate at this high level cost. Does that answer your question?
Not really. So do you have a breakdown in your numbers set right now that tells us what the your consultant cost compared to what the actual overrun contingency for the build would be?
No, we wouldn't have a breakdown. Usually design fees for, I can only speak for landscape design services, would be roughly 20% of construction costs. So these costs here would assume the cost of construction and including the cost of design, engineering, and construction. So these are intended to be comprehensive cost.
Okay, thank you. So in layman's terms, it's a 20% contingency for cost overruns on the build of the pier.
At a very, very yes, I would say yes, but take that 20% figure with a grain of salt, because there's many variables that go into that, because it's not just one designer, there's also the contractors and engineers.
So the contingency also takes into effect the construction of the pier. Would that not be in the cost of the pier itself in the estimates that you've given us?
I think our Director of Works might be able to help us out here.
Thank you. Through the mayor. So in working with the ministry on putting any of these prices together, they can't tell us what studies are required until they actually see what the design looks like. So these contingencies, they do include potentially water and wave studies. They do include, there's a bunch of different studies that may be required depending on which, especially that's why it says the premium and the enhanced. Some of the costs are quite unknown and the studies that are required are quite unknown. So we have a contingency on there that, yes, it does cover a little bit of the construction contingency, but it is a lot engineering contingency because we just don't know what they're going to ask at this time. I spoke with them as recently as Friday, the ministry, and they said, you have to show us before we can tell you what studies have to be done for these options. So it is a bit of a 40% contingency for quite a few different things.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that.
Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whatever we have to say, all the options will be shown to the public for discussion purposes.
Through the mayor to Councillor Peak. So the direction from council could be to do community engagement, further community engagement, and that could be looking at providing them these concepts as well as the breakdown of the various components that are there. So it's not necessarily for the public to say, we choose the enhanced option or we choose the premium option. It is for the public to say, potentially, we really want to see a jumping platform. We think that's the highest priority, or we want lighting, or we want. So these are concepts for you to get an idea of what some of the options could be. But the intention, what we think might be a good idea, is to go to the public and ask those things through a survey over the summer months.
Okay, I understand, and thank you very much for that clarification. If I may, my other question was, a slide, can it go from the top deck rather than having a lower deck, like having a whatever? Can a slide go from the kind of height that we have now?
Through the mayor to Councillor Peak, there are a few options that they have looked at. So as Rosanna's pulling up, there could be a slide that's coming from the top platform and down into the water. When further studies are done with the depth of the lake, we may consider that might be not a suitable location for it, and we may look at potentially putting it on the floating dock where it's closer to the water level.
Okay, and if I might, I look at, I'm not sure that we need a floating dock because we have lots of dock systems that are available for all kinds of play and jumping off further on the Rotary Beach, further down the shoreline. So that was a comment that I wanted to make as well. Thank you very much. I'll let others go in.
Councillor Trainer.
I agree with staff about doing the basic pier and because we can get started on that fairly quickly. So I like that idea. Overall too, I think it would be better to keep the pier more on the basic side because I'm just thinking about long-term maintenance. If you go to piers that are older, like, I'm thinking down on the in Vancouver, there's the piers that I've been to, and the ones that do have extra stuff, it starts to look worn after a while. So I'm just kind of thinking about ongoing maintenance. And if we have a really nice basic model with maybe a few enhancements courtesy of the Rotary Club, whatever they decide to add, I think that would be our best option. And again, then we get a replacement quickly. We also have the park nearby, Rotary Beach, which also has some other things that kids can use or jump off those docks there. So I'm not sure that we need to have a whole lot of stuff on this one, but yeah, that's just my thought. And then I was wondering, does the Rotary contribute to this discussion at all in terms of, do they have in providing a vision for anything that they'd like to add, or is that come later?
Lori.
Through the mayor, we hope to engage with, so right now we're just presenting the concept. Okay. So the intention would be to have a meeting with the Rotary Club after this, after we get council direction. And it could be part of the overall engagement with the community. So a survey going out to the public, but also including Rotary in those discussions.
Okay, so then at that point, they could add in any feature. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen, then Betts.
Thank you. I do too like the basic model there, and hopefully with the help of the Rotary Club of Summerland and other people's contributions, we could add some enhancements, but I do like the idea of a floating platform of some sort. I don't know how big it needs to be, but if somebody's struggling, it's nice to have that platform for the young people maybe to catch a hold of. It happens, and if it's at water level, it might be a handy asset to have, but a lot of the other amenities, I'm kind of hoping and counting on Rotary to help us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm in support of the basic pier replacement. The only potential questions I have would be is, could even the electrical servicing be under kind of the purview of the Rotary fundraising as a question? And secondly, design wise, I noticed one of the options would be for the the frame, not the frame, what's it called? Yeah, the side railings to be wood with cable. I think that the opportunity for it to, I think that could be a nice way to have a really nice experience at the lake without doing too many other upgrades, like a floating dock. I mean, Rotary is right there with the slide and everything. So to me, that would be the only one that stood out.
Thank you. Councillor Peak.
Thank you. If I might address, I like the basic, but for the difference in cost, a metal frame can make a big difference in terms of maintenance and replacement of things en route. And I appreciate what Councillor Trainer had to say in terms of long-term maintenance. So in some ways, the simpler we keep it, the better it is for longevity. And the difference between 700 and 1,000, 828,000 is not a heck of a lot in terms of 50 and 75 years. I think that to put what would maybe be useful in terms of basic plus a little bit more out to the public and let the public speak to the enhancements they may or may not like to see, then that makes sense to me. And I think that a solar enhancement rather versus electrical, solar doesn't have to be done on the pier. It could be done a pole or whatever on that berm on the agricultural side of the land side of the wharf. Doesn't have to be on the wharf itself. Here it's talked about as being on a shade thing. And I don't know that we even need a shade thing. I think the basic shape of the dock with a wooden railing and cable for safety gives us the opportunity to retain our iconic dock and have all the wonderful things that have taken place on it over the past. That is wedding parties and grad pictures and all that kind of thing still work. So I like those elements.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering if there's any value or any interest, or if it's even possible to preserve the entry dock and include that on the new pier to, might provide that connection to the past, and it could be something could be of value. Thanks. Joe?
Yes, that's the one portion that we are saving is the actual archway entering there.
Excellent. Somebody like to put a motion on the table, please? Maybe if we get the staff recommendation out, thanks. Councillor Trainer?
Yeah, I'll bring forward the staff recommendation.
Okay.
Basic, and that includes the upgraded footings or pilings. Yep, okay.
Councillor Van Elfen, second. Any discussion? Councillor Betts?
I just had a quick question about the second sentence there about initiating the community engagement process. So just in terms of the work that's already been done with the waterfront master plan, there was extensive consultations done with the community already. Do we need to go through the process again rather than just reviewing the document that was so recently brought forward? So,
Laurie?
Through the mayor, we did do extensive community engagement through the waterfront concept plan for a variety of components of the waterfront. We did hear clearly that preserving the pier was really important to the community with some enhancements. But as far as and there were some suggestions about lighting and shade structures and play features. But as far as specific details, we don't have, we could base it on the general comments, but if we want more detailed priorities identified, we could conduct the community engagement.
The reason I say that is we are about to engage in a major communications whole entire strategy about the rec center. And I would like our focus to be on the rec center in terms of what the engagements we're having with the community, just not to confuse matters, and seeing as we've done extensive consultations for the waterfront concept plan. So to me, actually the second point, of course, community engagement is always positive. I just feel that we've already done that step. And as the rec department and community services department, that we should be really focused moving forward on the rec center referendum.
Yeah, I mean, part of it might be, comes down to what Rotary raises, and that might answer our question for us, so. Councillor Patton, then Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My thoughts exactly. I think that once we get that Rotary sees, what these plans are, and Rotary is able to work with that vision. But I do think that we still need to have some public input in regards to the amenities that they're looking for, because we can ask Rotary to, whatever monies that they can raise to do this. But if Rotary doesn't have a guide from our citizens on what the citizens are looking at, it's not going to affect our waterfront master plan. All it's going to do is give some direction on what amenities they want to build up on that dock is. And I think that with Rotary being a partner with us on this, I think that's where Rotary takes and runs with it and do what they do best, and that's get public involvement in what has to happen with this. Anyway, my thoughts.
Councillor Peak.
I believe we still have to have that discussion with the community. I wasn't on council, but I was part of the community engagement process. And speaking as a resident, there was no dollars attached. If we had we had that community engagement, people would better understand the cost of the things they may have been considering in the previous discussion for the waterfront plan. So I think the opportunity to have that engagement, and our community is smart enough to understand that we're not doing just one process in terms of engagement with them, whether it's to do with the recreation center or it's to continue the waterfront plan. So I think it's important to continue that engagement. So we have some direction when the Rotary does its great raising opportunity, that we have an idea what the public is interested in actually seeing, having seen the cost.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed? That carries. So I think we can do one more item here, the UBCM awards. I think we should do that. We can probably move 7.5 and 7.6 and 0.9 into this evening, if that works for everybody. We do need to go into closed very briefly. So I'll need a motion to extend the meeting a little bit. Councillor Van Alphen? Till what time? Yeah, okay, second, Councillor Peak, all in favor? That carries. Okay, UBCM Community Excellence Awards. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In reviewing the annual UBCM Excellence Awards, it was identified that the Water and Roads Integrated Asset Management Plan would meet the criteria of the Excellence in Asset Management category. This includes programs that demonstrate a comprehensive system of asset management policies and practices, meeting and or exceeding accepted best practices. As council is aware, the Water and Road Integrated Asset Management Plan utilized a service and risk assessment to prioritize capital reinvestments in key asset categories. The plan was developed by incorporating community priorities, strong asset management principles, and through close collaboration with council. It also includes an innovative, engaging, public-facing webpage that summarizes the results of the plan, provides transparency in decision-making, and includes performance metrics. An application for this award was submitted by staff prior to the May 19th deadline. However, a resolution of support from council by August 18th is required to finalize the application. I'm happy to take any questions council may have.
Any questions? Councillor Peak.
May I bring the resolution forward?
Sure. Second, Councillor Patton. Any discussion? Councillor Betts.
I would just like to congratulate you and your team on a job really well done, putting together the Water and Roads Master Plan. I think it's such a critical piece for us as legislators to be able to have really just tied in different assets all together to make informed decisions in guiding or just rehabilitating our community's infrastructure. So thanks. I hope does this really well.
Thank you. I'll call the question then. All in favor? None opposed? That carries. So we'll have our public question period. Mr. Bessler, just before you speak, I just want to maybe say, on average, I would say you probably insult one staff member and one council member every time you come up to the podium. And so I just feel obliged to say that in Canada and the whole democratic world, really, local councils have a certain level of decorum, and we try to be civil and respectful. And that involves speaking to an issue, not speaking to a person. And what that means is that we don't personalize issues. We don't make personal attacks. It's not an adversarial partisan chamber like the House of Commons. We have our disagreements, as you heard today, but we remain respectful when we debate that. So I just invite you to think about that, think about our democratic institutions and what it means to respect them. So state your name and civic address for the record, please?
Before I start my 2 minutes, I'd like to address that. There are certain issues where certain people make decisions, and this is a public body and they are accountable to the public. I am always respectful when I get up to this microphone. I thank you for the opportunity every time. So I feel like you're trying to shut me down from exposing important issues, and I object to that. I will remain respectful as I always have. Thank you. Hi, Council. Brad Besler. I'd like to discuss a serious issue that relates to community safety. It has been brought to my attention that the person living in the van by the washrooms at Memorial Park has been inviting young kids and teenagers into his van. As I'm sure some of you are aware, there are many women and young girls in Summerland who have stated how this person has made them very uncomfortable and would not leave them alone. He always carries a knife, a large knife on him, and is usually intoxicated. So this is very concerning to a lot of residents, not just me, to hear that kids are being invited into his van and drawing doodles on his arm. Frankly, it's unacceptable. It is clearly against district policy for a person to park a van at Memorial Park full-time and live there, let alone someone who is a creep to women and girls in our community. So I'm respectfully asking you to show leadership and address this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Only in a resolution to close the meeting to the public. Councillor Van Elfen. Oh, one more. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Sorry, I was hiding back there. But yeah, just I had a bit of time, so just wanted to make one quick point. Just thanks so much, you guys, for all the work you guys put in. Lots of discussions, lots kind of going over this. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Van Elfen, for kind of spearheading this objective to just get this settled. I think that is actually probably pretty wise. I just want you to sleep on something though for a while, just about the metering in general. $600 and something thousand to kind of put meters on properties that has long been decided barely use any water. It's just a massive amount to kind of put forward. And it should be, you guys should have a clear idea of what projects are being deferred or delayed or put aside because of that. Like we still don't have an established benefit. We don't have an established benefit of how much water we're going to save or if it's going to make any difference in our system. So we're just pouring money into this. And another point is what if council in a year or two decides that the residential metering system is just too expensive to keep on going with, and they decide to stop? Well, you just now put $600,000 into this additional metering system. You're stopping the other one. If you just essentially maintain the status quo state, fixed fees are just appropriate for this size because it's just too cost prohibitive to put in meters. And then you leave yourselves open to actually not spending that money when you decide to get rid of the residential water metering program. So just please just keep that in mind. It's just a ton of money. I keep it in mind as well with the whole pool work. I know it's a big initiative for you guys. So much work is going into it. And I do support it. I think young families, tons of young families have moved here. I think it's a great kind of investment for our community, but for a community to get behind you on it, they really have to see really responsible fiscal leadership in the nuts and bolts in society, which is upgrading water systems, responsible management of our water systems, and actually clearly looking at, okay, what are we trying to do with the $600,000? Are we actually going to save any water or not? So thanks so much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. A resolution to go into close, please. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Betts, all in favor? That carries.